We'll start off. Thanks for joining this interview with us today. Would you like to start off by introducing yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me. This beautiful campus, University of Toledo. First time I've been here. I'm a EMU person myself, but beautiful campus. My name is Fred Monteleone. I was born July 29th, 1957. I'm 60 years of age.
All right, yeah. So now this interview, I'd like to focus on work and how it's changed throughout the years, and especially like the fields that you've worked in. So if you want to just maybe start from the first job you ever had and kind of move your way through and give us a little synopsis of each one.
First job I ever had, I was 10 years old. I was at my grandparents' house in Detroit, off of Springwells area, which is I think it's Mexican town now. But at that time it was all Hungarians. I was 10 years old, and my grandpa's basement needed to be painted. And he said, "You know how to paint, Fred?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Well, you're old enough now to learn." So he gave me a brush and a can of paint, opened it up, showed me how to scrape everything and paint. And at those days, there was no latex paint. It was oil-based, and it was intense. 14 years old, my father's side of the family, his uncle owned a air conditioning company. And in those days, there was no such thing as central air. Everything was air conditioning units. So you either went through the wall or installed it in a window. I worked with my cousin. We had our own van. And during the summers when I got out of high school, up until what I did till I went back to school. Actually, it wasn't high school. I was 14. I worked there for the summers. I was making $1 an hour. Then the next job I worked I was in high school. I worked for the old Sign of the Beefeater. This was a restaurant. So got out of that gig and went into I got a job. Hornet Reamer Corporation, which is a little factory, was in Lincoln Park at the time, and I cleaned on the weekends. I cleaned all the factory. Mainly, they were presses and things of that nature. And then from there, I went, graduated from high school. 6 days out of high school, my father, back in those days, you had a choice. You either worked with your father wherever he was, or you went to your friends and their fathers got you in. So at my time, I had a choice: either work for GM, Ford, Chrysler, Wonder Bread Bakery, or Great Lakes Steel. Okay. And then from there, if you wanted to go to college, you were on your own. You went to college. So 6 days out of high school, I decided to work with my dad at General Motors at Willow Run at the old bomber plant. Spent 17 years there. But so then from there, I became a GM gypsy, worked in 5 different plants until I got my 31 years in, retired out of Toledo Powertrain, believe it or not, off of Alexis Road. After that, I retired in '06. We befriended some nuns. They needed a sexton. We were out to dinner one day, and they said, "You're our new sexton." And I looked at them, and I had no idea what a sexton was. I said, "What do you mean a sexton?" Being a boater, I thought they were talking about a sextant that you measure the horizon and the stars and you calculate where you're at. It's the only sextant I knew. And they said, no, you're going to run our cemetery. And I have no idea. I don't know the first thing about burying a body. Yeah. They just looked at me and said, "You'll learn." And lo and behold, I did that for 10 years until I got cancer, and I was forced down here. Oh, really? And couldn't find a job, couldn't get a job down here working in a cemetery. No one hired me with all this experience, so I ended up working for Burkle Funeral Services, worked at the funeral homes for 1 year, and now I'm currently working at Dunham's.
All right, so the next question, we'll move on with this one. How has the workplace or just work environment changed from the time when you first started in any job just as a young man in the workforce to how it is now? What do you see differences do you see in the workplace?
Tremendous difference.
Work environment?
Back in my time, they didn't really look at, OSHA wasn't a big thing. They didn't even have OSHA.
They regulate safety, right?
Health and safety wasn't really looked upon. I was in manufacturing. The bottom line in manufacturing is just to get the product out the door. Put it this way, true story. I was 6 months working at General Motors. They stuck me up in the paint department. That time they didn't even have, you didn't have nothing, no masks, you didn't have gloves, and here they're like, here you go, this is your job, and my job at that time was, the cars were coming out of the body shop, and so they were all raw metal, and I had to wipe them down to prep them to go through being primed to the primer booth, but they had to be washed down with this certain product. It was called oleum, which was like an oil. Well, I'm just dipping my hand in this thing and just, it was my job for the summer, and I'm just, wiping it down. Not a problem, easy job, right? Yeah. Well, long story short, when I went to retire, I get in the mail, I get this letter, and it says, when you get cancer, if you choose to take your retirement, you cannot come back and sue us. If you choose not to take your retirement and when you get cancer, you can sue us. So I take this to the lawyer. Lawyer says, well, I hate to tell you this, but if you do get cancer and you choose to not take your retirement, regular pension and the whole 9 yards, and you choose not to do this, and you do get cancer and you choose to sue these guys, they'll tie it up in court. So just take your pension and live your life and don't even think about it. Lo and behold, 8 years later, I did get cancer. So they know these statistics.
So the letter literally said, when you get cancer.
When you get cancer.
Wow. All right, so the last question on this interview, I'd just like to ask you, what was your favorite job at all these jobs you've been to, and why?
My favorite job, actually, was probably running the cemetery.
Really? The job that you didn't even think that just came out of nowhere for you?
Taught myself, and it was very, very satisfying. First and foremost, in that line of work, there's no second chance. You have to do it right the first time. So there's no second chance in that, no mistakes. And I was very successful at it. I was very good at it. But anyways, I think that was my favorite job, for the reason being that dealing with the people, and I just felt like I, helped them.
I got you. Well, all right, that was a fantastic interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.